So there's a new Illenium album now, and I don't know how to feel about it. Honestly, I think I'm getting tired of his music in general. While he was one of the first artists to really get me into EDM, and his first two albums are still quite solid, melodic dubstep and future-based projects, his sound since then has been getting progressively more tired and one-dimensional. There were still many great, excellent songs on Ascent and Fallen Embers, but these projects have grown off me a bit since they dropped, and the song ideas in those albums start to get a bit repetitive and overdone for me. That's why I was worried about this new Illenium album, which is his fifth album in the span of 7 years, since I didn't know if the Illenium formula would still wow me in 2023. What we got was actually a slight switch up from his other albums, mixing his own signature sound with strong rock influences and other varying genres as well. Now, this should be an absolute sell for me, as I did like Set the Sky's rock future-based fusion album Sentiment, and I did enjoy Illenium's previous rock-leaning tracks. Plus, it's something a bit different coming from him. However, for some reason this album didn't end up clicking with me a lot. Hell, I'd easily call this my least favorite Illenium album. So, what happened here? Let's find out in this ranking review of Illenium's Illenium. Also, Ben's here. Say hi to Ben. Alright, let's get this going. Oh god, not this song. Honestly, I've never loved this song. Ever since it came out, it just rubbed me the wrong way. I get what it's going for, but honestly the production just sounds extremely muffled and restrained. It's putting a lot of emphasis on the trap beat, making the actual guitar line really not as intense as it could be. It gets better near the end, where the guitar actually has more space and the drums are sounding better, but honestly, it's just not really for me. It's not a sound that's the most pleasant, and out of all of Illenium's rock-leaning tracks, this one just doesn't do anything for me.
Oh, insanity. Yeah, I absolutely agree with Junior's take on this one. I already went on why this track annoys me to no end, but long story short, the production literally sounds like it wants to explode, but neither has the volume, impact, nor punch to do anything with it. It just remains at the same obnoxiously quiet level the whole way through and doesn't evolve whatsoever. Seriously, if you remove American Teeth, which honestly would be welcome as we'll talk about that later, I would not be able to tell when the hook begins or ends. It literally blends into everything here. It's just not remotely dynamic at all.
Another problem about this song is American T, the actual vocalist on this track. He honestly reminds me of the Kid Laroi in the way that he sings. His emo trap delivery just is not for me, and when he gets in the upper register, I just lose all interest. I just do not vibe with this vocal at all. Plus, also, I kind of hear some glimmers of auto-tune, especially in the hook, and I don't know, I just feel like vocal processing just sounds a bit weird. Honestly, I just don't like this song at all. This is easily my least favorite on this album. Yeah, I'm just not a fan.
You can easily hear the auto-tune on the pre-chorus. It's just laughably jarring next to everything else. When you make Kid Laroi sound good, that's probably not the best sign in the world of anything. But yeah, easily the worst song on the album, one of Illenium's worst songs to date, and the fact that it's a flop single is kind of hilarious to me, and also really telling. Next.
This song just sounds really uninspired coming from Illenium. The drop has such a sluggish kind of pacing, and it doesn't really help that Skylar Grey's vocals just are snooze-inducing on here, which is pretty much her usual. I feel like this song would have worked better if the actual vocals tried to aim for something more emotional or a higher register, but Skylar Grey just isn't able to hit those notes at all. Her vocals just sound very monotone, and she sounds like she'd rather be anywhere else than on this song. But yeah, the production on here is just really boring. Illenium tries to mix in the rock sound with his usual melodic dubstep formula with the drop, but honestly, it just doesn't really work. And Skyagree's sort of vocal sample in the drop just makes this even more boring. Also, that growl in the middle of the drop, yeah, it doesn't fit at all. I don't like this. Another single from this album that I just didn't care for.
Yep, From the Ashes. Yeah, I've got nothing to say about this. As soon as I saw this collaboration, I knew that this would be bad, but God, Skylar Grey just finds a way to make any song she appears on fall incredibly flat, regardless on who's producing. She just has no personality here, and placing her over a beat trying to exploit the way this does with its guitars and that really flat drop, yeah, no thank you with that. It's just not remotely noteworthy at best, and an absolute slog at worst. I can't stand this song.
We end up here.
Yeah, this is another rock leaning cut that just did not work for me much. Honestly, I think this is mainly because of the production. I do feel like Illenium's percussion and melodies does drown out a lot of the rock elements in here, and it doesn't really sound the most pleasant. And all-time low, Alex's vocals sound oddly strained in the hook, and honestly, this might be one of his weakest set of vocals in a while. I'm gonna be honest, I feel like if this leaned more towards a proper rock sound, this could have worked for me, but the electronic elements just drown out any intensity that's here. It kind of neuters the whole song. I'm just not vibing with this one either.
Okay, back to you, another side I can honestly switch around at any given point, given that these two songs annoy me to no end, but I will say that Back to You at least has the benefit of being consistently mid as opposed to other side which had potential to be close to great. Yeah, I'd rather not go into the all-time low allegations, that's just a completely different rabbit hole, but with songs like this, and especially on Ghost Story by Cheat Codes, it's abundantly clear that all-time low does not fit on dance production at all. I just cannot stand the vocals on this one at all. The lead singer just sounds completely uninterested, and honestly that really replicates how I feel whenever I hear this song. And even if the production on the drops is actually really damn nice and creates a pretty decent atmosphere, it's nothing mind-blowing. It's incredibly safe for him, and honestly it's just a completely forgettable dud for me. I'd skip it.
On the other side.
Honestly, I don't know what Illenium was trying to do here. Very Blue is a good vocalist on here. She's not as good on this track compared to on her Flume collab, Rushing Back, which is the only other song that I know from her. Honestly, it's mostly production-wise that I have a problem with this because it should work. And after that hook, I kind of expected something more euphoric and hard-hitting. But instead, we got something that's more trap-leaning, kind of like Drew Lou or something you'd find on Trap Nation a few years ago. And I don't know if this sounds dated or just doesn't sound the best coming from Illenium. This is a new sound for him. I do respect the fact that this is something different coming from Illenium, but I don't know, the drop just doesn't really fit on here with the rest of the track, the versus the hook. And the overall drop, the production just sounds really stiff. This is oddly a case where I'd say that if Illenium just stick to his normal formula on here, I think it would have sounded more natural and, well, honestly, more appealing to me. Also, that fake out is like really rough. I don't know what the hell Illenium was trying to do here. Compared to Illenium's other Set the Sky collabs, yeah, this is kind of a letdown. I'll just be blunt.
So, okay, who decided that this was a good idea? This song just really frustrates me because it's actually close to being really damn good. Variably sounds quite nice on the verses, and the production actually sounds pretty damn good, especially before the first drop. But man, once that drop hits, it just does not work for me at all. I get that Illenium's trying to switch up his sound a bit and go for more of a future trap approach, and this does give me a few similar vibes to that I Face My Fears by Skrillex, but yeah, I'm sorry Illenium, Skrillex you're not, and this just sounds very jarring, especially compared to the melodic verses that don't really fit against it at all. I will say that Vera Blue and Said the Sky do save this song, but it's still not really all that good. I genuinely don't see myself coming back to it at all. And the fact that it didn't turn out really damn good, especially given the names involved, yeah, that's really disappointing for me.
Yeah, this is basically just Diet Good Things Fall Apart. I've already used that comparison to describe Heavenly Side from the last album, so I guess a better apt comparison would be that Heavenly Side is Walmart, Good Things Fall Apart, and Worst Day is fucking Dollarama, Good Things Fall Apart, which is not a compliment. Because, yeah, this is basically just a recycled idea from the past two albums, which kind of shows that Illenium doesn't really have a lot of new ideas for his songs.
You know what, since some of the viewers here are actually outside the States, shocker, I'm going to use an appropriate comparison with this song to Good Thing Falls Apart. Worst Day is the Subway Good Things Fall Apart. I mean, technically it has its audience, what it sells isn't terrible on a fundamental level, but there's so many minute details that make it sickening to me. The main draw always feels like a total cash grab and always feels like the third option when it comes to what's competing against. I mean, even Heavenly Side had more punch than this. You cannot tell me Illenium went in with any sort of creative vision on this one. It's just a blatant Good Thing Falls Apart ripoff.
And honestly, I feel like the vocalist on here is not as interesting and honestly sounds a bit worse than those two tracks that I just mentioned. I don't know what the hell Illenium was doing by pairing Mac's natural vocals with some higher pitched ones in the hook, but it just does not sound good at all. Honestly, it kind of makes the hook just a bit more unbearable for me, especially with the really boring melodies and the percussion, and I'm just not vibing. Okay, seriously, is it mere Illenium's percussion recently has just not sounded very great? It sounds a bit less punchy. It's just, he uses it in like every song, and this is a problem that I have with Fallen Embers, but I feel like I have it even more here because the songs are more rock leaning, and honestly something that I like about rock songs is the fact that the drums are pretty punchy and impactful, and I feel like not having that does strip away a bit of intensity from the rock tracks and just doesn't make them hit their full potential. Even though Worst Day is kind of far from being the most rock track on here, I just wanted to mention that because this is a problem that has been annoying me about Illenium for basically the last 3 years at this point. So yeah, no, I'm not endorsing this song. I'd rather listen to Good Things Fall Apart on repeat instead.
Max sounds terrible, the production has no distinct qualities, the vocal melodies on the hook are annoying as all hell, and let's not forget the drop being incredibly uninteresting. Yeah, quite frankly, this formula wasn't going to work a third time, and the chart run this had definitely proved it. Okay, so the one thing that really holds the album back for me is just its lack of variety. A lot of the songs just sound incredibly samey and gimmicky, but then you have cases like this and I Want You to Stay that are definitely pushing it a little bit differently this time. I will say this feels more like an interlude that focuses around a particularly good sample of Bring Me the Horizon's Drown, which bounces off against the down-tempo production really well for a phenomenal payoff that actually sounds really satisfying, even if the snare is very weirdly mixed. But again, it's more of an anonymous interlude, doesn't stick out as much as it should, but all things considered, it could have been much worse, and the fact that I'm ranking an interlude really high on this album, yeah, that's kind of worrying, not gonna lie.
I was a bit worried at first when I heard that this song actually had a sample of Bring Me the Horizon's Drown, one of their biggest hits that came out in 2014, because I'm honestly a big Bring Me the Horizon fan, and I was a bit worried with the initial singles that Illenium was just kind of going to ruin that song for me. Honestly, this ended up not as bad as I expected. The sample is actually used in a pretty respectable way. It does add a lot of atmosphere to the overall track, but I'm just not liking these drops at all. The snare sounds really watery and out of place, and the melodies just sound like white noise to me. Honestly, the title's accurate because this song kind of sounds like what drowning feels like. I don't really mean it as a compliment. The execution, I get what it's going for, but it's just not really well executed. I'll just say this. This is not for me. I'm not a fan. I'm sorry.
Got no time for this life.
I'll say this, the punk rock sound does work a little better on here on the production side of things, and I do like that the last hook does let loose a bit more. It has a stronger guitar line, and the drums are pretty punchy, probably courtesy of Travis Barker on here. But yeah, the other hook don't really hit as hard, mostly again because of Illenium's percussion just not having a lot of impact in general. But also, I'll be honest, this song is a bit dragged down by Jaden himself. His emo trap vocals don't really appeal to me, and I'm especially not a fan of his delivery in the bridge when he basically sounds like Diet Ronnie Radke, and you don't want to sound like fucking Ronnie Radke. Oh my god. So yeah, there are some positives on here on the production side, which honestly is a positive for Illenium, but yeah, bring a better vocalist instead of Jaden, and this could have probably been higher on my ranking.
Oh boy, this collab I was dreading when I first saw it. I mean, I can't stand Jaden's music, and his annoying emo trap vocals just do not work well over electronic production. It just wasn't turning out good. I will say though that the vocal melodies here are at least decent, and it has a somewhat okay production style, I guess. But unsurprisingly, Jaden is by far the worst part of the song, as his whiny trap vocals just don't work on this production at all. And combine that with some verse production that's just so flat, and the drops that sound incredibly uninteresting and don't really change up much from the rest of the song. A consistent problem across this album, mind you. Yeah, this is easily the worst of the new songs for me. I can't stand it at all. It's not good.
Yeah, you were right.
God, I wanted to like this song. I mean, I've kind of become a Grabbits fan recently. I like his last album, and his vocals are usually really strong, and honestly, his vocals are the best part about this song. Honestly, from the strength of his vocal alone, he kind of carries this track, because production-wise, yeah, this just does not sound appealing to me at all. It kind of feels like a failed attempt at a future bass song, mixed in with some sort of Subtronics-esque melodies. I know that Wooley's kind of leaning towards that kind of sound recently, and I've just not really been a fan of it much. Speaking of Wooley, I'm kind of surprised that this song didn't have a middle drop, and honestly I'm kind of glad I didn't, because oh boy, his last songs with some middle drops have just been dreadful. So yeah, I'm not a fan of these payoffs, and honestly, yeah, this song just bores me again.
I will say that you were right, being so early on in the track listing does definitely help in this regard. This was the first song on the album that really lent more on the future trap approach, and even if it was really worrying going into it, especially with Wooley on the production credits, I was at least optimistic given that I like Grabbits a lot, and it's fine, I guess. I don't think it's really as bad as I expected it would be. I mean, yes, the production is still incredibly flat, and the transition between the verses and the drops just doesn't really work at all, but Grabbits at least sounds really invested. There's a decent atmosphere, which is a consistent thing across this entire album, and honestly, for all things considered, it's at least trying a bit harder than some of the other tracks here. I'll give it that. That being said, it's incredibly forgettable, and honestly, that sound will get old in record time for me. I'm still not huge on it. I'm gonna be real here, guys. This is a song that I can see myself turning on with time, because in the context of the album, this thing is dreadfully safe and boring, almost to a comedic level. That being said, as a standalone song, I actually really like it. Jake sounds really good, and the production has the nice breezy charm to it that I actually quite enjoyed. Not enough to call this a highlight of the album anymore, but it's decent, I guess. I didn't find anything I truly disliked about it outside the context of the album it's from.
I'll be honest, this is probably the most average sounding track on this album. There's not a lot on the production side. It's a very simple kind of pop song. I feel like this is high on my ranking mostly because of Jake's honestly really good vocals. I do like his delivery in the verses and the hook. He absolutely sells this. He's a good fit on here compared to on his other dance collab with Martin Garrix, which just does not work. But we're talking about Illenium here. Honestly, this is the most inoffensive song on here. There's nothing to really love, but there's nothing to really hate about. It kind of just exists. For this album, I guess that's a positive.
Can you feel me shivering?
What this song reminds me of are the collaborations many melodic dubstep acts have with heavy artists like Excision or Wooly, which is absolutely not a good thing because said collabs get dragged down by these artists forcing heaviness into something that doesn't need it. In this case, the song already has the metal elements from Spiritbox that sound halfway decent, and the lead singer is really selling them here, but even if the melodic drop did feel a bit weak, it matched the vibes well. I actually kinda liked it. But then someone decided to incorporate a heavy dubstep drop, and not only does it not fit or flow well at all, it sounds really terrible with its lack of melody and genuinely uninteresting payoff. This one had potential, but my god, I just can't stand the bad parts. It takes away from Spiritbox's contributions, which are genuinely really good. So yeah, disappointing. I wanted to like this more.
Okay, I liked this song when it first came out, but now, after a year since it's been released, I've grown out of it a little bit. I realized that I really like Spiritbox vocals, and honestly, they can pull off the growly stuff really well, and the intro is fucking kick ass. But the rest, I honestly feel like Illenium drowns out the production a lot. Like with his electronic elements in the drops, honestly, I barely hear the guitar, which is a shame. Honestly, I feel like if Spiritbox just did this song on their own, it would probably sound even harder and better, and honestly would probably remove that fucking heavy drop in the middle. I'm kind of tired of songs going for that melodic dubstep, then heavy dubstep, then melodic dubstep formula. It's overdone at this point. It was cool when Island by Seven Lions, Wooly, and Trivecta first did it in 2019, but now it's just really overdone. I do still like this track, but man, I wish it was even stronger. I feel like the rock influences are kind of drowned out, and that's something a bit negative about this song. I know that's nitpicking, but seriously, this could be so much better. I was really close to actually enjoying this song. Teddy Swim's a very good vocalist, and he absolutely nails it in the verses. And I'm also a fan of the strings arrangement that comes in the second half of the song. It does add a lot of emotional depth to the verses and the hooks. However, the drops are basically what killed this for me. They sound really boring and plain, and the pitched up vocal sample on here, oh, it was alright the first time, but like the second and the third times, I just tune out. I really feel like they drag down the drop a lot. If the drop instead had the fuller sounding melody and something more euphoric, I probably would have loved this a bit more. But as it is, man, I just wish I liked this much more. That's all.
So yeah, another one of the big problems with this album was that the single choices were legitimately awful, with the exception of 2 songs. This is the weaker of those 2, but still goddamn great. Teddy Swims really proved his vocal abilities with this one, with his vocal range sounding fantastic over this lighter future-based production. It's honestly more of a throwback to the sound of Ascend with the pitch-shifted vocals and smoother percussion, which is both a blessing but also revealing that Illenium's best songs in recent years feel like they could have been on an older and better album than this. Still, glad this became a hit. It's a really good song and really catchy. I quite like it.
So this is basically Fractures 2.0, and that kind of reinforces my point where I say that I feel like Illenium doesn't really have a lot of new song ideas on this album. Yeah, this is a repeat of Fractures, which I'm not sure if that's a good thing, because Fractures was really good. It was one of the bigger hits on Awake. This is from 2017, and hearing another song that sounds like this in 2023 doesn't really feel like it's a proper artistic evolution. And while the job does sound good, I just keep getting reminded of fractures in songs that I could be listening to that sound better or were made a few years ago. Yeah, this Rihanna sample was well executed. I do like it. Yeah, even though I do like this sound, I just don't know how to feel about a song like this being on the 2023 album.
Oh yeah, I Want You to Stay is also here. Yeah, can't you tell that this is a remix of Rihanna's Stay? That vocal sample is blatantly obvious, especially on first listen, and my god, I really wanted to like it more. I mean, I will say that it's produced really damn well on the verses, and the sample is actually integrated quite well, but then the drops come in, and even if they do hit with some pretty hard intensity, I don't know what it is about the mixing, but it feels like it holds this song back from exploiting the way it really should. It's a shame too, this sounds like something that would have come out of the Awake era, but it just doesn't hit with the same level as those songs on that album do. I mean, it's good, more of an interlude again, but pretty damn good one. I'll take it.
With my eyes wide shut, I say I love you, but I don't.
While I do like this song, is it me or it barely has any Illenium elements in it? It could have just been Avril Lavigne and Travis Barker's song, and I wouldn't have batted an eye. The only sort of electronic element in it is kind of the trap switch up for the last hook, which I feel is a little bit forced, but the rest is basically just a kick-ass pop-punk song. And I have no problems with that. Avril Lavigne is a really damn talented vocalist. She sells this really well. She has some very strong vocals, and the drums are just really good. I wish those kind of drums were used more throughout the entire album, because those drums just sound really good, and I think that's mostly thanks to Travis Barker being a pretty solid drummer in general. But yeah, I just don't know what Illenium did here much. I don't know, the production is really strong, but it also sounds like Illenium had the least involvement in it, and that just feels really weird, because it's an Illenium album. You would want him to have more involvement or sound more like him. I don't know, this is an odd entry on this album, but it is one of my favorite songs on here, so I won't really question it.
Really kind of telling that one of the best songs on the album is a song that's literally just a pop-punk song made by Avril Lavigne and Travis Barker, and one where you can barely tell that Illenium even contributed at all. But that being said, I really like the production on this. It goes for this really nice atmospheric approach that a lot of pop-punk really struggles with in recent years, and Avril Lavigne's absolutely fantastic vocal range really works wonders over this beat, and especially on that hook, she just sounds absolutely incredible. It really impressed me. I will say it's very much safe for this genre, and if it didn't have Illenium's name on it, I don't think people would have been as impressed by it, but still, it's a really damn good song, and the fact that it seems like it's going to be the big song from the album release, yeah, I'm not complaining. Definitely worth checking out.
The closing track on this album is kind of Grower. It's slowly become my favorite single out of the bunch, and it does a lot right. Nina Nesbitt's vocals are quite good, and it uses the usual Illenium melodic dubstep format in a nice way. Honestly, I know I've complained about Illenium not changing his style a lot in the previous albums, but it is fun to see a few songs in that style still, and the production is kind of stronger on here than on other songs on the album. It's punchy. However, I still have a few problems with this, like the percussion in the verse sounds really clunky for no reason, and I would have preferred something simpler to replace that instead. And the melodies in the drop are kind of drowned out by the overprocessed and long vocal chops. I just don't know why Illenium placed them on here, because the melodies does sound good. It could have carried the drop a lot, but yeah, those vocal chops just kill it for me a little bit. So yeah, even though I do like this song, I do feel like it could be better. And also note, it's nitpicky as fuck, but this does not scream closing track for this album at all. It sounds like a middle of the album track, and not something that you place at the end. Compare this song to Lonely, Afterlife, and especially Brave Soul. Those songs really feel like the end of a journey. Hell, even Let You Go on Awake, even though I feel like that song is kind of just okay at best, it still closes that album quite well, and this one left me a little, doesn't really feel that way to me. The album kind of needs a stronger outro. Still ends the album on a strong note, I'll admit that. But yeah, compare that to the other closing tracks on Illenium's album, this feels a little less special, and that's kind of disappointing. I'll just be honest.
Oh yeah, case in point with what I said on All That Really Matters, this was the other genuinely great single before the album, and once again, it sounds like a bonus track from Awake, just lovely. I mean, that's not to discredit Nina Nesbitt's fantastic vocal performance, the gorgeous production with great guitar integration and drops that make for a particularly hard-hitting way to close out the album, it's just not the most exciting song in the world. That being said, it's definitely the best of the singles here, and yeah, I'll definitely take it, especially in the context of the album, it's a pretty strong closer.
Now we're falling apart, we're fading away, pretending.
Wow, this one really caught me off guard. It absolutely slaps and is easily the best integration of rock on the entire album. Chris Corelli of Motionless in White really is selling the hell out of this with his shouting and growling across the song that really makes for a really intimidating vibe, and combine that with the metal touches make this the heaviest song on the album by far, and unlike Shivering, it actually really makes use of that heaviness for some really fantastic drops and a really crunchy guitar solo that I genuinely liked. Shout out to the final drop too, it has this really anthemic sound to it that I quite enjoyed. Yeah, this is one of the fan favorites on the album, and I absolutely agree. It's a fantastic song, easily one of the best here.
This song is actually really strong. I do like the sort of Linkin Park's vibe that this song has, mixing the rock elements with the electronic ones in a really nice blend. My main complaint would probably be that the percussion could be a bit heavier in general, and that the sort of heavy breakdown in the middle doesn't feel the most well executed, though the electronic elements in here have grown on me since my first listen. Honestly, the vocalist of this band, Motionless in White, really sells this for me. His intense and gritty vocals just fit really well and a lot of intensity, and the guitars actually have a lot of room to breathe. It sounds amazing, and the last hook with the transfer sort of lead really fits in super well. Honestly, out of all of these songs on here, all of the rock songs, this is easily my favorite. It's really well executed, and honestly, even though it has some nitpicks with Illenium's involvement in this song, there are more nitpicks than anything. Honestly, if the album was more like this, I would have probably liked it more. I'll just be honest, this one worked for me a lot. And here's my favorite song on the album. I know I've been kind of negative towards this whole project so far, but this one is actually like really excellent. Probably like top 10 Illenium songs of all time. Seriously, it's super well produced. The melodic dubstep drop sounds really rich and euphoric and full, and it's backed up by a lot of really solid atmosphere, a nice intro. Honestly, this really fits as the intro of the overall album, and the Psytrance switch up is fucking insane. It's really well produced. Honestly, this song reminds me of Seven Lions. I'm honestly surprised that this wasn't a Seven Lions collab, and honestly, the production here is really strong. I wish the overall production on this album was of this caliber, and I honestly don't know why the rest of the songs on here aren't as punchy or impactful as this song is, because I know that Illenium can do stuff like this really well, but for some reason the percussion and the melodies for the rest of the album just doesn't sound as good, which is honestly just weird to me. But still, this song is honestly easily the best. It kind of sucks that it's actually the first song, because it sets you up for something that will be really, really great, but it's kind of just a disappointment in general, at least to me personally. But yeah, this song fucking rules. This is easily the best song on here.
I mean, come on. Was it going to be anything else? This literally sounds like a song from 85's Divinorum, which is one of my favorite dubstep albums of all time. And the fact that Illenium was able to make a song like this at all, especially in 2023, is genuinely impressive. This has such a fantastic atmosphere to it that is incredibly spacious and goes across some really interesting areas across its 4-minute runtime. And especially those drops just sound absolutely flawless with their production, and some genuinely fantastic synth production that really helps it. Combine that with the mix of orchestral strings, piano and auto-tuned vocoder vocals from Annika Wells that make this incredibly captivating all the way through. It's just an absolutely fantastic opener that, while definitely not living up to expectations with the rest of the album, yeah, it was a really good start to this thing. Definitely set my expectations high, all things considered. So yeah, easily the best song on the album and one of Illenium's best songs to date. Absolutely worth listening to if you haven't already.
So this was our ranking and review of Illenium's self-titled album. Now a quick review before closing this video. So on the one hand, I have to appreciate the switch up in sound that Illenium took on here. It is nice to see him branch out into other genres and not stay confined to his usual formula, so I have to respect him for that. It was interesting to see his genre pivots and the rock sound being experimented on here. So they were interesting surprises, but on the other hand, that usual Illenium formula that I mentioned does sneak in a little bit, and it's what is holding this album back from really being good to me. And okay, there are songs on here that are pretty much classic Illenium, except that I feel like I've heard those songs done way better on his previous albums, like I Wanted to Stay being really similar to Fractures, and Worst Day being really similar to Good Things Fall Apart. But really talking about the rock sound now, I feel like the percussion kind of holds back that kind of sound from really hitting its full potential. It's kind of a criticism that I've had throughout this whole album. The percussion doesn't really hit as hard as it could. I had this criticism for Fallen Embers as well, with repeated listens. But yeah, I feel like Illenium's percussion has been significantly less punchier and impactful and honestly hard hitting compared to his earlier work. And same thing for his melodies. Like in general, for this album, the melodies are not as compelling or interesting as on his previous albums. And honestly, I feel like there are songs where some vocal chops were kind of just too much. They should have been removed and let the melodies breathe a little more. It probably would have worked better, especially on songs like All That Really Matter and Love Me a Little. And also, the production has been dwindling down a little bit. The sound design is not as refined as on his previous albums, which is kind of a problem, especially for having that kind of rock sound. I feel like having some nice production is kind of important. I don't know, I feel like the production on here hasn't really hit as hard as it could have. Sometimes it sounds a little messy, and that just sucks to say about Illenium. And also, I feel like the ideas sometimes feel a little bit undercooked. I feel like with some more studio times for certain songs, they could have sounded a bit better and stronger. But yeah, that's another nitpick. So, as I said, I respect Illenium for stepping out of his usual comfort zone to make different sounding songs than usual for most of this album. But in my opinion, this is kind of a letdown. And it does sound like he's running out of song ideas in general. Like the most classic Illenium sounding songs on here feels like retread of previous hits from him. And a nitpicky point, but the rock pivot here does feel like him chasing the big pop punk trend that's been popular in the mainstream and TikTok for a few years. Now, I'm sure that this sound comes from a genuine place for Illenium, but the timing with this album's release kind of leads me to think that he's trying a little bit to capitalize a bit on the trend. Even if it's slowly dying, it is still relevant, especially with having acts like Avril Lavigne, Travis Barker, and Jaden on this album. Yeah, I do kind of feel that way. But like I said, I'm sure this comes from a genuine place for Illenium, and I know this album is very influenced by artists that he heard when he was younger and he was into those artists, and it's really noticeable on here. And I have to say, it's nice to see. Nonetheless, this album didn't work for me as well as his other albums in general. I feel like this is his weakest project to date, and maybe it will grow on me over time, but for now, I kind of feel like this is sort of a 5 out of 10. On my good days, it could lean towards a 6. This should have been much better. And honestly, 5 albums in 7 years. Honestly, I feel like Illenium should take a break to maybe refine his production skills and find some more ideas, not pump out music too much so that he gets fresh ideas and maybe he returns in like 2 or 3 years with a really strong album. Because I do feel like, even with the rock sound, his ideas are a bit overdone. If he wants to keep with that rock sound, yeah, I do still think that him refining his skills would really benefit because I do see the potential in this. I just don't feel like it's there yet.
So my thoughts on the Illenium self-titled album, it's fine, I guess. I mean, the production is serviceable, even if it's very, very samey, and the rock leading cuts are very inconsistent at best, with some really good songs and then some of the worst songs that Illenium has ever made. Thankfully though, there's enough genuine quality across this album where I can't call this an outright dud, and given my expectations for it based off the singles, I'm pleasantly surprised that it wasn't terrible. Still not remotely interesting and probably not good, but I've definitely heard worse albums out there. It's fine. Check it out if you're curious, but honestly, don't expect much out of it.
So thank you for watching. It's been a while since I've done a sort of video like that. And honestly, it's really nice to bring in a collaborator this time around. Thank you, Rum3n, for collaborating with me on this video. You're really amazing. Check out his content. He does weekly reviews about the dance charts. And he does review a few Illenium songs on these videos. So yeah, check them out if you're interested in just hearing some thoughts about the current dance trends.
So I'd like to thank my good friend Junior for having me on board for this video. They make really great content, so if you haven't, please subscribe to their channel. And if you're interested, my channel also discusses similar content regarding rankings of albums, specific subjects, and I also talk about the mainstream Billboard Hot Dance charts in a weekly series called An Analysis of Dance. And yeah, if you guys are interested in checking that out, please go and check out my channel and subscribe if you're curious. Yeah, thank you again for Junior for having me on board with this. This was a ton of fun, and hopefully we get to appear in more videos together in the future. So yeah, thank you.
So yeah, if you like this, consider subscribing and all, and I'll see you guys in the next video. So yeah, see ya!